Hi, Lana. That looks like we'll have to wait a minute. Hi, Dora. Nice to see you. No, I got a couple of hearts. That's good. So I'll do a little sharing, and please do some sharing for me, and I'll be back in a few. Dora. Nice to see you. How's my sound, by the way? Evening, Russell. Hi, Bruce Johnson. Sally Riley. And Dolores Pierce is here. Hi, Dolores. Nice to see you. And Devore and Lana, of course. So good to see you all. I still have to share to a few more places. I see Barbara Wernick has joined us. Hi, Barbara. And Rick Maynard. Nice to see you, Rick. It's good to see you all. One more share and we'll be starting. Okay. This is the second time that I've done this particular video. I'm doing it again by popular demand, or actually, it's Lana's idea. And she thinks that it would be of interest to many people, and therefore that it would be a good idea to do it again. And so here we are. Okay. So the topic tonight is savings for couples over 65. Okay, if Bernie's agenda is passed. And I have a Redux on the title because it's the second time. Okay, I've done this. It'll be a little different, of course, from the first time because I've had some new thoughts since then, though I haven't actually added anything to the numbers. But maybe I have some other comments that I can make on the numbers. So, I'm pretty sure I have those other comments, and I hope that they will add to the presentation. What I'd like to do now, though, is to... Oh, Susan Eldridge is here. Hi, Susan. Nice to see you, too. What I'm going to do now, though, is start by sharing my little spreadsheet. So here we go. You should be able to see it. I'll adjust Chrome so you'll be able to see it a little better. There we go. Should be... Sorry about that. A little glitch in the procedure. It's back now. So, here we go. There are a number of categories that I put the savings in. One is savings from the Medicare for All bill. I'm assuming that in the end, Bernie's going to pass HR 1384 because it's a better bill, and probably Jayapal is going to want that bill. And she's done things for Bernie, and he's probably going to want to do something for her. So that's probably going to be one of the factors, involved here. And she really does have a better bill. It has a transition period of only 2 years as opposed to 4, and it's going to bring, I think, a lot more positives to Bernie if he passes it. So I think that's really quite important. Okay, but aside from that, there's a Green New Deal category of savings. There's a retirement security expansion category, a debt forgiveness, interest rate reduction category, and then, of course, the grand total of estimated savings. So I've calculated savings based on my experience, and Bonnie's, in these 4 categories. There may be some other categories, that I've overlooked and that you can think of. And that's good because the more savings we can find, the more additional categories we can find, the more credible the case we'll be able to make to people over 65. Still Bernie's weakest category of support, whereas I would argue that it should be one of his strongest categories of support because he's doing so much for people over 65. I also should put in the qualification, right now, that even though the spreadsheet is savings for couples over 65. Of course, the savings, okay, for individuals are roughly 50%, okay, of what they are for couples. So if people are single and want to calculate savings, okay, as individuals, then all they have to do is divide the savings in half, roughly. If people, okay, are under 65, then the savings may be entirely different. Uh, if they still are earning, okay, a fair amount, they'll probably have to pay some taxes. Now, under the bill, they won't have to pay a premium. There are no premiums, there are no copays, there are no deductibles. Okay, so anyway, this calculation is going to differ somewhat from couple to couple, and it's going to differ somewhat for singles. It depends on what's happening to them and what they can take advantage of. We'll see this when we go through the Medicare for All category. Okay, this is based now on the bill currently in the House, H.R. 1384. Okay, that's the bill introduced and written by Pramila Jayapal. Okay, it is the bill that the Physicians for National Health Program, the PNHP.org group, it's of the bill they currently consider to be the gold standard, okay, in Medicare for all. That's the bill they would most like to see passed, and it's the bill I would most like to see passed. So the premium costs for Bonnie, okay, for myself, which include both the costs for the version, okay, of Medicare we have now, and for our Medicare supplement, which is which is a Medicare Plus supplement from Kaiser. Okay, now these figures, the $5,148, is going to vary depending upon whether you have bought into a Medicare Advantage plan or you're going only with Medicare, okay, or you have another Medicare Plus program. Then the cost won't be exactly the same, okay, as Kaiser. So that's going to vary from couple to couple. But I think generally, if you have a Medicare Advantage plan or you have a supplement plan of some kind, okay, to Medicare, then the total is going to be somewhere in this neighborhood of $5,148. We also have expenses on an annual basis that we calculated at $650. Now that's also going to vary from couple to couple and from person to person somewhat. So everybody has to calculate this for themselves. We have deductibles of perhaps $250 per person. Now, we don't have any assistive devices right now, except that Bonnie has a cane, which a friend of ours was kind enough to give us. And that's the only assistive device that she needs at this point. Okay, and I don't need an assistive device. But of course, we are in our 80s now. And so it's likely that pretty soon we're going to need, some assistive devices of one kind or another. So I estimated the costs of those at roughly $2,000 per year. Of course, under the Medicare for All bill, the cost to us would be zero, so we would save the $2,000 a year. H.R. 1384 also includes transportation to healthcare services. Now, transportation to healthcare services is not very high for us now because we still have a car, and the operating cost of the car to go to our healthcare services is fairly small. But of course, if we were to have something serious happen and have to take an ambulance to the hospital, then those costs would very, very quickly rise. So I'm estimating that they might well easily amount to $1,000 per year. And so that's where the $1,000 comes from. Now, I may be too low in this estimate. I may be a little too high in this estimate. I don't know. We have yet to have much experience in that area, but I'm doing the best I can with respect to that. Okay, prescription drugs. We now have copays from Kaiser specifically for prescription drugs. I've estimated our copay costs for the relatively few prescription drugs that we have to be roughly $500 per year, something like that. I looked at our costs. I think that's a pretty good estimate of what they're going to be unless we get very seriously ill. Now, I have prostate cancer now, but I've been able to avoid for some years. I've had it now for, well, okay, it'll be 8 years diagnosed this coming summer. It was diagnosed as an aggressive cancer, but I've been able to contain it with diet and some mild prescription drugs, the copays for which are not very high. So that's why we still have a relatively have a relatively low cost for the copays on our prescription drugs. Now, HR 1384 covers long-term community and home-based care. We haven't had to take advantage, of anything like that. We don't expect to have to take advantage of anything like that for the foreseeable future. But of course, we're in our 80s. Some people who have those kinds of circumstances would have a situation where long-term community and home-based care would cost thousands and thousands, of dollars. That would be saved under Medicare for All for them. I haven't tried to estimate it, but for us, because it's not a protection which is immediately relevant for us. It's not an immediately relevant savings, and I can't really estimate whether we're going to need that sort of thing over the next 5 years. So I left it at zero. In other words, I hope we'll be lucky and we're not going to need that. Now, we have long-term nursing home care. That's in H.R. 1384. It's not in Bernie Sanders' Senate bill. That's one reason why I hope he eventually passes the H.R. 1384 bill, or a compromise bill between the two of them, which includes long-term nursing home care. I think that is very essential because, as many of you know, we now have the situation where if you go into a nursing home and you're fairly poor, then if you go into a nursing home under the Medicaid program, you have to come close to bankrupting yourself first before you're due any benefits, okay, from the program, the existing program, the Medicaid program. That's not something Bernie does anything about in his bill, but it's in HR 1384. For some people, that would be worth many, many thousands if they had to spend 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months in a nursing home. The cost would just be astronomical, and so would the savings be. They'd be far in excess of the $9,548 that I estimated here. Okay. So I think the estimates I've given here for this are actually fairly conservative. Medicare for All bill could actually save people over 65 a lot more than $9,548. Moving to the Green New Deal, there's energy efficiency, okay, and weatherization. Now, we live in an apartment, and the costs for that, of course, are absorbed by the development, okay, at this point. But we have to assume, I think, that under the program, developments like our own, okay, are very likely to have to build in, okay, some energy efficiency types of measures, okay, and have to do something with respect to the weatherization aspect of that. Now, I am making the assumption that some of these costs are going to be passed to the renters. I think I'm making a conservative assumption, okay, and assuming that's probably going to increase our rent by $600 a month. I'm sorry, by $600 a year, roughly $50 a month. That's a fairly small increase due to that kind of activity, but I feel sure the development is going to want to pass that on to the renters and not absorb the whole thing itself. I think that's a fair assumption. I should add, if people are still in their homes, the energy efficiency, okay, and weatherization costs, which would be covered by the Green New Deal, would be far in excess of $600. They might well be $6,000, for example. And in that case, the Green New Deal would save them $6,000 just on that item alone by itself. Then also, one thing Bernie's going to do is, under the Green New Deal, he's going to want to replace the whole fleet, okay, of auto and truck transportation, and replace it, okay, with new electric vehicles. So, for people who are relatively poor, and probably for a lot, okay, of older people, okay, who are relatively poor, he's going to have grants for people to buy new vehicles. I'm assuming those grants will be worth about $1,000 a year. I'm assuming people won't have to pay for the new vehicles themselves, but the grants will cover the cost, okay, of the new vehicles. And I'm making the conservative assumption that the new vehicles will probably cost maybe $20,000 or something like that. I'm assuming there are trade-in credits against it as well. So I'm estimating the worth of this at about $1,000 per year. And there's going to be broadband access, okay, for everyone. Now, we have broadband access now. We expect that government subsidies are going to lower the cost of that. Our broadband access is now $90 a month, and pretty soon it'll be going up over $100 a month. We had a plan that guaranteed, we have a plan that guarantees the broadband access charge, okay, at $90 a month. But after 2 years, they get to raise the cost of that. So we figured probably subsidies from the federal government so everybody could have broadband access would probably be worth at least $50 a month or $600 a year. Okay, so I estimated that. Okay, I don't know if that's true. The $6,000 for any energy efficient, subsidized housing slash fair housing, we figured that grants for that to low income people primarily living on Social Security would probably worth something would most probably be worth something like $500 a month to us, which is $6,000 a year. Why do I say that? Well, because the development I live in is part of the fair housing program, but I'm sorry, it's part of the subsidized housing program, the 8A program. However, the 8A program is not fully funded by the federal government. So people such as Bonnie, and myself, and many people who are even less well off, than we are, even though they might technically qualify for the program, are not able to get in because it's fully subscribed with just a fraction of the funding which Congress, is currently providing for the program. But Bernie's agenda promises that there will be full funding for the program. We figured that's going to allow us to reduce the rent here by roughly $500 a month, hence the $6,000 per year. So if we figure the Green New Deal then, for us, is going to, the Green New Deal and Bernie's fair housing program taken together, is going to produce gains for us of $8,200 per year. Next, we get into retirement security expansion. We have a new senior center that's going up but fairly close to us. That will offer certain services involving physical activity for seniors, which we don't have available in our housing development at this point. We have a small room for exercise that's not really satisfactory for that. It's better than nothing, but it's not actually a gym. we figure there might be small fees for the senior center, which will be built fairly close to us. Uh, and so we figured most probably subsidization for that kind of thing from a Bernie Sanders administration would probably save us perhaps $500 per year. Then Social Security increases. So Bernie has promised, okay, that everyone on Social Security will at least be at or above the poverty level. And for us, that's roughly, okay, an increase of $6,000 a year. Okay, it's an extra $500 a month. Now, for others, okay, it's going to be different because there are a lot of people who are less well off, okay, than we are. Some people, it's going to be $8,000. For other people, it'll be $9,000. It could go higher than that. Everybody has to compute it for themselves. We estimated it for ourselves, and we come up with $6,500. Now, then there's a debt forgiveness and also interest rate reductions. Okay, what do I mean by the latter? The former is actually pretty plain, but I expect that when Bernie gets in office, he's going to be regulating the credit card uh, interest rates. He's given very strong indications that he's going to do that he thinks the interest rates, okay, are unconscionable right now. He's complained about the fact that the average credit card interest rates have now reached 21% for many people. I think it's a fair bet that he's going to immediately place a ceiling on those at 15%. And maybe we'll even go lower. Well, to us, that's certainly going to represent a savings of $1,000 per month. Now, we don't have any medical debt, okay, because we pay for our insurance, and we pay for our copays. So we won't save anything on that. But there are people who have thousands of dollars, okay, in medical debt. And one thing Bernie's program calls for is forgiveness, okay, of medical debt. People could be saving, I don't know, you have to compute it, for yourself. It could be in certain circumstances 20,000, 30,000. I mean, the savings, some people, can be astronomical. We think they're substantial for ourselves, but we don't have any medical debt that can be wiped away. Then there's also forgiveness for credit card debt. Okay, now where does that come from? Well, we know that Bernie has said that he's going to erase student debt completely. And that's already part of his program. Now, the forgiveness, okay, of credit card debt is not a part of his program. But our credit card debt in this country is on the order, okay, of magnitude of student debt. And it's just as much a drag on the economy as the student debt is. Okay, and given the fact, okay, that a lot of the credit card debt uh, was something that people could not help. Okay, in other words, there are many people who lived on credit cards when the crash of 2008 happened, and in the aftermath, and who have never recovered from that, and who, as a result, have a lot of credit card debt that they're still carrying, and that has grown over the years. And I have to say that I see Bernie as going after that because he has a very strong sense of justice, and he's going to see large quantities, okay, of credit card debt as in part due to the results of the crash of 2008. And he's going to see that it's a drag on the economy. And I think that the step after medical debt forgiveness and student debt forgiveness is going to be credit card debt forgiveness, at least in part, okay, and maybe the whole thing. In the big picture, it's not that much for the federal government to absorb, okay, and to wipe away. And doing so would be very good for the economy. And Bernie wants to do good things for the economy. So I had that item in here because I think it's coming. It's going to be part of his program. Now, we don't expect to be eligible for that exactly. So we didn't put any of that in. And the same is true for the medical debt. So the only thing I estimated here was the $1,000 for smaller interest on the credit card debt that we have. So that comes to $1,000 per year. What I'm doing here is trying to compute annual savings as opposed to one-time savings. So what do we have? We have 9,548 coming out of the Medicare for All bill. We have $8,200 that's coming out of the Green New Deal program. We have $6,500 that's coming about as a result of the retirement security expansion that Bernie has promised. And then we have changes to the credit structure in the United States, which he also has promised, which will be roughly about $1,000. The grand total of this, the grand total of the 9,548, the 8,200, the 6,500, and the 1,000 is $25,248. Now, I believe that that is what we will save if Bernie Sanders becomes the president of the United States and if he passes his whole agenda. $25,248 per year is what we would gain from that. Now, okay, in our case, that comes close to a doubling of our Social Security payments. Okay, it's not there yet, but it comes close to a doubling of them. That's a tremendous reason for couples like us to vote for Bernie Sanders. And that's apart from any other reason. That, for example, we'd like to see everybody covered by a Medicare for All bill. We think it's a human right, and we want to see it for that reason. And we think the Green New Deal is necessary for the continued existence, okay, of human beings on the planet. So we want it for that reason. And of course, we want the retirement security expansion, not just for us, but also because we think that seniors have a right to live with a certain amount, okay, of dignity in an economy that, even if they were capable of continuing to work on a full-time basis, very frequently doesn't have any jobs for them. I mean, seniors in their mid 70s and late 70s, okay, and their 80s are not very marketable, even if they have extremely strong skills, okay, and capabilities, and even if their capabilities have not faded, okay, in any material way. Firms just don't want to invest in them, right? So there are a variety of reasons why I would support these four categories of policy, okay, in any case. And there are reasons beyond that to support Bernie. For example, his foreign policy is superior to that, okay, of any other candidate. That's clear from the debates, the kinds of things he would change, the kinds of things he would be turning around. The federal job guarantee, we very much want to see that passed. Okay, for some people, that would be a tremendous gain. For seniors who still felt that they wanted to work full time but were unable to find jobs at 65, 70, 75, the job guarantee program would guarantee a job for seniors who want it. Even more savings than what, even more gains than I've calculated here. What Bernie is promising is a transformation of society in ways that will produce economic justice, also political justice, criminal justice, social justice, and also climate justice. And we want to see all those things happen. But just apart from those things and our desire to see those things, we also have the incentive of understanding that we would probably gain in excess of $25,000 per year from Bernie's agenda, should he be able to pass it. And we think that's a tremendous incentive for ourselves and for other couples and for individuals and for seniors over 65 to want to vote for Bernie Sanders. Now, I have to say something here. I have no connection to the Bernie Sanders campaign. I'm not reflecting the views of the Bernie Sanders campaign. Now, I do give some donations to Bernie Sanders. I mean, our family is frequent small donor, okay, to Bernie Sanders. We are technically volunteers for the Sanders campaign, but we're not part of the infrastructure, part, okay, of the apparatus. We are not under any direction from the Sanders campaign. It's doubtful that I would take any direction from the Sanders campaign because I'm not the kind of person who takes direction. Okay, I have my own views. I always want to be free to state them. So, what I'm doing now in putting forward this evaluation of savings for couples over 65, okay, if Bernie's agenda is passed, this is the calculation of Bonnie and I alone. It has nothing to do with the Sanders campaign. But it gives reasons why we favor the Sanders campaign and why we think that other couples and singles over 65 should also favor the campaign, okay, of Bernie Sanders before the presidency. So, I'll now consider your comments on this. I'll change the view back to our usual view. I hope you find the estimates as stunning, okay, as I find them. When I went through the calculations, okay, and I arrived at these, and then did the final computation, I was stunned at the level, okay, of savings. I was absolutely stunned. So let's go to your comments now. Hang out for a second. I'm going to refresh my page because it doesn't have the view that I have now. Here we go. Okay. That should take away any echo. And here we go. Good evening, Russell. And Judy Arbic is here. And welcome, Judy. Kay Ryan. Hi, Kay. Kay's watching the coronavirus coverage on Rachel tonight. She went out to get a few groceries today in case the banks go completely down. Also, the orange idiot says, sorry, but if there is a med for it, it won't be affordable for us poor folks. Well, I don't know about that. Kay says, also, Bernie did a town hall. If it's not available for us poor folks, I think a lot of poor folks are going to be in the streets of Washington, D.C., looking to do a people's impeachment of Donald J. Trump. Kay says, also, Bernie did a town hall with Reverend Barber and the Poor People's Campaign tonight. Wonderful. Now, Reverend Barber is a spellbinder of a speaker. A few years ago, Bonnie and I, this must have been, I think it was in 2014 or 2013, we went to an event of the Campaign for the American Future. They had conference in D.C. and a number of people spoke at that particular conference. The lineup included Keith Ellison, who was a congressman at that time. There was Larry Cohn, who's, by the way, quite engaging speaker, okay, a real firebrand himself. He used to be the head of the Communication Workers of America. Now he's the president, okay, of Our Revolution, if I recall correctly. Also speaking at that event was Bernie Sanders, but the hot ticket, okay, at that point, in other words, the person that all of the progressives were very, very excited about, was actually Elizabeth Warren. And she came over from the Senate to speak to us, and everybody was all excited, not so much excited over Bernie, they were excited over Warren. And so she gave a short speech, and then she went back to the Senate. But the really featured speech, the key speech of that conference, was an address by Reverend Barber. That was so fantastic. I mean, I really thought that I was seeing the second coming, okay, of Dr. King. I really did. I thought, boy, this guy is really fantastic. Tom Mullen said, I thought you were in timeout. I don't know about that. Anyway, Russell Gorman says, Stephanie Kelton's graph shows a significant bump in private deficit debt from, say, 2003 to 2009. What is that attributed to, since the government was in deficit at the time? The private sector was in deficit also. The government was in deficit at the time, but the government deficits weren't sufficiently large to compensate for leakage due to trade. The trade deficits in those early years in the Bush administration, and for some part of the Bush administration, they reached as high as 6% of GDP per year. Okay, and the Bush 43 deficits were not really that large until about 2007 or something like that. So I think it's attributed to the fact that we had a very large current account deficit at the time. Okay, and it was large enough that it still meant that the government deficit was not sufficiently large to offset the loss of private sector assets all through that particular period. And from living through that particular period, I can say that I know that there were many people who, in order to keep pace with the housing market, were going deeply into debt for housing, because essentially they were speculating. The housing market was rising, and people could easily get into houses, and they were going more and more deeply into debt, okay, in order to go into housing. And they believed that that was not going to be a problem because the growth in housing value is going to cover them. But of course, the housing market started to collapse in 2007, and the collapse went still deeper in 2008 and 2009. And many areas of the country, housing values fell to what, 60% of what people paid for them, 50% of what people paid for them. I mean, so many people were underwater. I mean, they were underwater. So I think those were the factors involved. The private sector didn't go back into surplus until what looks like TARP had probably kicked in. The private sector didn't go back into surplus until the government deficit got sufficiently large to overcome the foreign deficit. Actually, two things happened. With the crash, the foreign sector deficit got smaller. It actually went under 3% per year. So it declined from around 5 to 6%. I think it got as low as 2% actually per year. At the same time, the government deficit was growing. Right after the crash in 2009, if I recall correctly, it went up to 10%. It even went up in excess, okay, of 10%. So with the foreign sector deficit going down to 2%, the private sector at that point, with a government deficit of 10 to 10.5%, uh, had an 8% of GDP surplus. That's what happened. It went into a huge surplus. Susan asked, how much do you save? Well, I summarized and said $25,248. Nancy Blackmar is here. Warren Chamberlain is here. Hi, folks. And Devora has now rejoined. Okay, please do some more sharing for me. I need as many shares as I can get. Please also, when the YouTube video comes out, but please also share, like, and subscribe, okay, the YouTube video, and please become a patron at www.patreon.com/Joe_Firestone. I would greatly appreciate your doing so. Even $1 a month, $2 a month, even that helps. It helps. I mean, I'm doing something like live streams now that are roughly in the neighborhood of 10 hours a week, and they require preparation. And I really need to supplement my Social Security income. So please, 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 do go to my Patreon account every once in a while. And for those who have gone, thank you very, very much. I very much appreciate it. I'm fully aware of it, and I very much appreciate it. So thank you very much. Are there any more comments and questions? And Rick Maynard says, I do what I do and quite frequently work with the campaign. I support Bernie, just one of many that I have supported over the years. Right, but Rick, are you connected to the Bernie campaign in terms of actually being part of a campaign organization and taking orders from that particular campaign organization? Russ says, thank you for diving into that. Well, thank you for coming. I'm glad, okay, that you appreciate it, Russ. I will now sit up straight so that my chin can be seen. You will soon see me sitting up straight. There I am. Gary Hauk has joined. Judy Arbick says no, but thank you for your great information about Bernie 2020. Yay, Bernie 2020. Judy says good night. Good night, Judy. Thanks for coming. Okay, any other comments? Okay, if there are no other comments, then I will say goodbye for tonight. I'll be back tomorrow night in my usual slot of 9 o'clock or so. And I'll probably be talking about the campaign in some way, but also some other critical issues, okay, as well. So thanks very much for coming. And good night.